Is your God a God of the gaps?
Absolutely not. And I'm glad you asked the question, because as a scientist, the dreaded gaps are something that we're very aware of. So the first point here, I think, to make is this, that it is not in the bits of nature that we don't understand that I find God. It's in the bits we do understand. And if I go back to the very first question, I look at the universe, the very fact that it's mathematically describable. Those aren't gaps. That's the fact. It lies at the basis of all science. And that, for me, is the overwhelming bit of evidence. To make it more precise, when Isaac, now I know how it works, so I don't need God. I've filled the gap. Why did he not say that? Because God for him was not an explanation alternative to science. I think Richard Dawkins and many of the new atheists make a very basic and very silly mistake by confusing mechanism with agency. And so as the study of mechanisms increase, they think the need for an agent decreases. That's like saying that because you understand the laws of internal combustion, you don't need to believe in the existence of Henry Ford. It's as silly as that. And so that's the first point to make. And it's a very important part to emphasize, because very often the discussion, particularly by the press, who are always interested in the controversial bits, concentrate on the one area lower down, which I think is actually of secondary importance. They concentrate there, and they force in these gaps. But now, I think there's something much more subtle going on here, because I think there are two kinds of gap. The first kind is what I call the bad gaps. That is the gaps that disappear as science advances. But I believe there are gaps that appear as science advances. And as I said just now, if there is a God who gave an injection of information that was necessary together with whatever natural processes to start life, I would expect a purely naturalistic study of those processes to increasingly reveal a gap. That's exactly what origin of life research has done since 1953, when Miller and Urey won the Nobel Prize for supposedly discovering life. We now discover that it's so much more complex with this semiotic, this linguistic-like dimension. And now it's the very nature of what has been discovered that is pointing towards intelligence. So you see, it's in one sense a gap, in another sense it isn't. It's pointing towards an intelligent origin. The gap is that we cannot tell you what you would have observed had you been standing there. But it's not a gap in the sense that we're making an unjustifiable inference. I can see something that I've never seen before. The Smithsonian Museum has got a room in it where there are all kinds of gadgets. Nobody knows what they're for. But they're self-evidently the products of intelligent input, whatever other mechanisms and processes were used. And that's the point I'm making. That's not an inference from a gap, even though we don't understand what the thing's for, how it was made. It's what we see in the finished product, the text, if you like, at the end, that allows us to infer an intelligence. So I think this subject has been far too trivially treated, and people have just said, oh, God of the gaps, and that's the end of it. I think it's more subtle than that. But I do, as a scientist, I'm allergic to being accused of the God of the gaps, because I don't want to be understood as a lazy academic. I can't explain it, therefore God did it. It's because we can, at least in part, understand it, that we might be inclined to say that God did it.